Luego hablará Léa Tosold, que es una activista e investigadora en epistemologías feministas antirracistas. Tiene un doctorado en Ciencias Políticas por la USP de São Paulo y ha sido también postdoctorada en el Centro Mesila. Pertenece al colectivo de estudios antirracistas y anticoloniales GIRA y el Comité de Solidaridad con las Luchas de Resistencia en Tapajós, com Tapajós. Les hablará en inglés y el título que nos ofrece es Imagining, Feeling and Hearing Knowledge Otherwise.
Olá a todas, todos e todes. I would like to start by thanking Moira and also Juliana for the invitation to be here with you, and also with Natalia and Tula in this event organized by the Latin America Interdisciplinary Gender Network and the Centro de Investigaciones y Estudios de Género de la UNAM, which is such an enormous pleasure and honor. I also thank you both, and also Asia, Megan, Claudia, Kati, and all the Yale conference and event team that is working to make this the best possible event in spite of the conditions imposed by pandemic. I feel, in spite of the distance, very warmly welcomed. I also would like to thank the support of the GIRA Coletiva, the Anti-Racist and Anti-Colonial Studies Intervention Collective, from which I and Natalia am part of, and also Álvaro especially, in preparing of this event. And I would also like to thank all of you who are accompanying us here today. And I thank also to the ancestors, the not absent ones, as Conceição Evaristo writes in one of her poems. So I hope to make a meaningful contribution, and I am sure we will have a great debate. So, I am sharing my screen with you. Okay. So, I will read my presentation in order to make sure that what I would like to share with you today is as accessible as possible in the very short time we have. So currently in Brazil, pandemia has been used as a weapon in order to continue and deepen the rule of total violence in which we live, aiming at the destruction and obliteration, in particular, of Black, Indigenous, queer, trans female peoples in their existing social fabric. This is the context from which I am speaking to you today, which permeates everything I can impossibly share with you, and which will be inescapably echoing in the tone of my voice, in my stumbling, underlying these words and the silent spaces between them. It will be echoing even while I speak with the poet, historian, and activist Maria Beatriz Nascimiento of finding possibilities in days of destruction. One of the effects generated by the overwhelming character of total violence in the everyday life is the closure of our capacity to imagine, or as the artist and philosopher Denise Ferreira da Silva puts it, our capacities to image, as well as to think and feel otherwise. We are easily pushed into a reactive position in which the agenda is given exclusively by the ones in control of the means of production and reproduction of total violence. And so, total violence invades our lives and our very capacity to dream. As the psychiatrist and revolutionary Frantz Fanon would have put it, total violence enters in our dreams because, while awake, we find ourselves in a nightmare. By dream here, I mean not an individual escape from reality, but the ability to collectively image it otherwise, in a propositive manner, on grounds that are not those imposed by the hegemonic rule of total violence. To dream, therefore, is more than imagine a future world to come. It has to do with the ability to hear and being affected by the emergency of the presence of what, in spite of so much destruction, is alive, by what, as Audre Lorde would put it, was not meant to survive. How to co-move beyond a mere reactive position, one that, by operating in the already given hegemonic terms, risks reproducing violence in the very attempt of denouncing it. As Denise Ferreira da Silva warns, in the already given hegemonic terms, it does not matter how far we go in the denouncement and the depiction of the killings of racialized bodies, it will not unleash an ethical crisis. In order to be able to hear, feeling, imaging, and acting in collective and propositive manners, we needed to access and operate on different existing onto-epistemological bases, the ones that enable life to flourish in spite of everything. As I intend to briefly share with you in what follows, Beatriz Nascimento's notion of Quilombo is particularly powerful in the text of envisaging such possibilities in days of destruction. Beatriz Nascimento, as Juliana already presented to us, dedicated her life to the study of Quilombos. Her multifaceted work offers inspiring and valuable insights to rethink the onto-epistemological basis in which both knowledge production and collective modes of action are grounded. From the several definitions of Quilombo she proposes along her life, I suggest that we start by reading together the following one she wrote in 1976, and I quote, "The Quilombo was not an attempt at a mere and simple rebellion against the slavery system. It was also a form of political and social organization with very strong ideological implications in the life of the Black person in the past and which is projected after abolition into the 20th century. It was not only the need to flee that allowed the establishment of the Quilombola society. It was the capacity to create an alternative society with its own rules that differed from the dominant values of the society in which Black persons were forcibly integrated. For this reason, I am more concerned with revealing the lesser known aspects of the Quilombola piece than with rebellion itself." End of quote. For Beatriz Nascimento, the Quilombo is not an alternative collective regime of conviviality lost in the past, nor merely a remnant, but a historical continuum, which neither begins nor ends with repression. She recognizes the continuum of the Quilombo in the present, in shanty towns and poor neighborhoods, in samba schools and Afro-Brazilian religious spaces, among others. The Quilombo does not evoke the memory, does evoke the memory of both past and ongoing violences that urge collective elaboration and transformation, but does so in a way that does not merely reinscribes it. For the Quilombo's main goal is more propositive than reactive. It aims at cultivating survival and the flourishing of existence in spite of everything, a possibility in days of destruction. It is possible to suggest that for Beatriz Nascimento, if the Quilombo is a historical continuum, it does not operate with temporal discontinuities, but with temporal juxtapositions. The Quilombo operates at the same time in the past, in the present, and in the future. In a very same territoriality, we can encounter multiple temporalities at once. For example, through the presence of the past in the present, or through an image of the future already projected both in the present and in the past. Such understanding of temporality unsettles the very hegemonic notion of progressive time, which presupposes a separability between past, present, and future, precluding the establishment of more substantial, that is, not sequential or developmental, connections between past, present, and future. This understanding of time entails broader onto-epistemological and political implications, from which I briefly highlight three here. First, in intergenerational terms, the ancestors, for instance, could exert their agency as much in the present or in the future as in the past. Second, what I consider to be remarkable, the juxtaposing character of time in the understanding of Quilombo as historical continuum enables to consider the feasibility of another possible world, not as something to be built exclusively in the future, as if we had to start from the scratch, but as something that is also operating in the present and has operated in the past. This implies that the future, the other possible worlds we want to live in, would not constitute a mere devir. In this sense, the hegemonic rule that reproduces and naturalizes total violence does not appear anymore as overwhelming as it is usually portrayed in reactive terms. And third, the notion of Quilombo as historical continuum also opens analytical space to inquire about our present, past, and future implication as individuals and collectively, both in the maintenance of violence and in the fostering of spaces of existence in spite of everything. If the past is alive in the present, for instance, all of us are somehow implicated and constituted individually and collectively in various entangled ways by violence and by the possibility of existing otherwise. The juxtaposing temporalities of the notion of Quilombo as historical continuum, however, does not preclude transformation. On the contrary, for Beatriz Nascimiento, the racialized body is Quilombo, and as such, the body is the historical document par excellence. This aspect of the Quilombo refers to the ability of recognizing in the body a knowledge that enables existence in spite of everything, a knowledge that the non-white bodies do not know that they have beforehand. For Beatriz Nascimiento, nonetheless, the recognition of the Quilombo that lives in a racialized body under the rule of ongoing total violence is not self-evident. As she argues, it is only contextually and collectively that it is possible to realize what exists beyond total violence that imposes itself in a subjectivity. So her focus is not only on individual histories per se, but on how they are contextually connected, transmuted, and potentialized as part of an ongoing collective history of existing otherwise. In this sense, the notion of Quilombo proposed by Nascimento incites the emergence of knowledge that is in intimate relation with the fostering of collective spaces of conviviality in its everyday life, for only through epistemic collectivities in their own terms, it is possible to activate what is Quilombo in the body, to flesh out existence in spite of total violence, a possibility in days of destruction. If the Quilombo that is contained in the racialized body can only be activated contextually and collectively in a propositive manner, what exists in spite of everything can be finally activated without idealization or claims of authenticity, which occurred as a consequence of both temporal discontinuities and a binary thinking proper of reactive perspectives. Nascimento repeatedly draws attention to the fact that she does not seek, with the image of the Quilombo, a nostalgic return to the origins, in a movement of selective rememorialization that aims at reestablishing an ideal past. Existence has its mysterious ways and is woven by irretrievable contours, as Beatriz Nascimento puts it. Existence, therefore, not only escapes of being fixed or apprehensible in its totality, but also makes room for the emergence of the unpredictable, or, as the Zapatistas would say, of what seemed impossible until the previous day. Here, I wish to raise one last aspect of Beatriz Nascimento's notion of Quilombo. For her, to activate the knowledge that enables existence to flourish despite everything implies also the opening of space for what cannot be completely known or apprehended, or in other words, to what is alive precisely because it cannot be completely known or discursively represented. Counter to the colonial logic of appropriation of subaltern modes of knowledge, Beatriz Nascimento therefore urges for a form of hearing and imaging knowledge that allows for more lightness and mystery, as she suggests, that makes room for the murky, the nocturnal, that reveals itself precisely by the possibility of maintaining a certain intimacy, by strategically refusing to provide the keys to its total comprehension. This understanding resembles Edouard Glissant's notion of opacity, a possibility in days of destruction. After all these remarks, I finished this presentation with the probably most famous definition of Quilombo provided by Beatriz Nascimento in 1977. So I quote, "The Quilombo is an advancement. It is to produce or reproduce a moment of peace. Quilombo is a warrior when it needs to be a warrior. It is also a retreat if the struggle is not necessary. It is sapience, a wisdom. It is the continuity of life, the act of creating a happy moment, even when the enemy is powerful and even when he wants to kill you. The resistance, a possibility in days of destruction." As Denise Ferreira da Silva puts it, which in my view is in consonance with these remarks on Beatriz Nascimento's notion of Quilombo, we do have to live in this world knowing that total violence is the rule. Yet, it is urgent that we move in such a world as if it had already come to an end, and acknowledging that we have all that we need in order to know and make the world otherwise. After all, in spite of so much destruction, we have not been defeated yet, as Nascimento puts it. So thank you very much for your attention.